some things to say, but one of our panelists has to leave. So, as Tracy said, my name is Tasha Young. I am a board member of the Lower Hudson Valley Progressive Action Network and a member of NIPAN. And without further ado, hi everyone. I want to introduce Jeffrey Deskovic, who is the founder and executive director of the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I need more energy than that. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you very much. The people most affected by a problem are often those who are closest to a solution. I spent 16 years in prison in New York State from age 17 to 32, wrongfully convicted of a murder and rape which I did not commit. I was exonerated through DNA testing 10 years ago, which not only established my innocence, but it also identified the actual perpetrator, who was subsequently arrested and convicted. One of the main causes of my wrongful conviction was prosecutorial misconduct. When the DNA did not match me pre-trial, the prosecutor, not wanting to acknowledge that he made a mistake, solicited fraud on the part of the medical examiner. For those that don't know, when an autopsy is done, the medical examiner is supposed to make their findings contemporaneously as they document their findings as they actually make their findings. So it was only 6 months after documenting all of his findings and only in response to the DNA test not matching me that suddenly, for the first time, this medical examiner claimed that he found medical evidence to show that the victim had been sexually active. This opened up the door for the prosecutor to claim that it didn't matter that the seminal fluid found in the victim didn't come from me. That didn't mean I was innocent. That simply meant that the victim slept with yet another person prior to being supposedly raped and murdered by me. So in order to wrongfully convict me, the prosecutor was willing to trash the reputation of the victim who had already lost her life. He had done this in 3 other cases unrelated to mine. He had this unholy tag team going on with the medical examiner, in which he would always get this medical examiner to alter his findings in order to fit prosecution theory. This medical examiner was simultaneously moonlighting as an expert in neighboring counties where he was helping people get away with crimes. And he was complained of by authorities. So whichever way the money flowed is the way that this medical examiner testified. When I later sued him in court, he admitted that this slide that he based his finding on, that claimed that he said it had perforations, that it didn't actually show what he claimed that it showed. The other aspect of the prosecutorial prosecutorial misconduct was that one day before officially getting the report from the FBI lab, the prosecutor rushed to the grand jury to get an indictment so as to be able to avoid presenting that exculpatory DNA testimony to the grand jury. That, along with the other factors, led to my ultimately being wrongfully convicted. My sentence was 15 to life. I lost 7 appeals. I got turned down for parole. Ultimately, I was exonerated, as I mentioned before, 10 years ago, after doing 16 years, through further DNA testing via the data bank. Determined to take what happened to me and to try to take the negative and turn it to a positive, I became an advocate. I've always felt when attending lectures it's important to know something of the credentials of the person speaking in front of it so I can attach whatever weight I'm going to give to that when it comes to those ideas. And so I'm going to share a little bit about my background in terms of my body of work since my emergence. So it's for that purpose. I'm not, my head is its right size, my feet are firmly on the ground. I'm not here to toot my own horn. I'm just sharing you a little bit of my background. So in my 10 years of freedom, I got the bachelor's degree. I completed a master's at John Jay College, which included completing a thesis on wrongful conviction causes and the reforms needed to prevent that from happening. And I just finished up my second year of law school. I've given close to 100 presentations around the country and some internationally. I was a columnist for 5 years, so I have more than 200 works that are published on this topic, and I've been published in 9 different publications. I've given a lot of print, radio, and television media interviews, basically trading personal privacy in exchange for greater awareness of those issues, hoping to move the ball forward some. I regularly meet with elected officials and I testify at legislative hearings. In recognition of my advocacy work, I've received a few awards. I got the 2015 Humanitarian of the Year Award from the New Rochelle Chamber of Commerce, and I was recognized as New Yorker of the Week by New York One. After being home for 5 years, I was able to receive some financial compensation for my ordeal. And I decided that I wanted to take my advocacy work to the next level. So I committed $1.5 million from the money that I received to start my organization named after me, the Jeffrey Deskovic Foundation for Justice, whose purpose is to reach back and free similarly situated people, along with trying to bring about policy changes designed to prevent those injustices from happening in the first place. So in our 5 years of existence, we've exonerated 2 people, and we got another 4 people out through other means. We had a hand in the recent passage last year of a bill that was pertained to videotaping interrogations and identification reform, although those bills wound up being watered down from what we were originally were pushing. I am an advisory board member of a coalition group called It Can Happen to You, in which myself and further other advocates, we have this coalition, and it's made up of many different autonomous organizations that have their own issues that they focus on, but they come together specifically to work on legislation designed to prevent not only wrongful convictions, but also false accusation. The coalition is made up not only of organizations, but also individual advocates, family and friends of people who've been falsely accused or wrongfully convicted, and of everyday citizens. So if you're interested in criminal justice reform, you know that you really can't join a nonprofit organization. You can join a coalition. So working with those advocates, we have a bill that we've come really, really close to passing the last 3 years. I'm working on it for 5 years, but we've got all the way to the altar, to draw an analogy by way of marriage. So the bill is S-2412C, and it would establish a commission on prosecutor conduct. I'm going to give you the bill number again. Okay, it's S-2412C. It would create a commission on prosecutor conduct. We have bipartisan support for the bill. The bill sponsor on the Senate side is Senator DeFrancisco, a Republican from upstate New York. And on the Assembly side, Assemblyman Nick Perry from Brooklyn is our bill sponsor. Why do we need a commission on prosecutor conduct? Because right now, the prosecutors, they're like above the law, right? If there's a commission on judicial conduct, you know, many other professions, there's a professional association, there's a board you have to answer to. Many professions, all the way down to the barber, has somebody that they have to account to. The prosecutor doesn't have any such analogous entity. Okay, the disciplinary committee is totally ineffective. That's geared more for defense lawyers and lawyers who like commingle client funds. Many lawyers don't bother to file a complaint when prosecutor misconduct happens because, number one, they know that nothing's going to happen, and number two, they're worried about the repercussions. They're worried about when they represent future clients that they're not going to get plea bargain offers extended to them. So they don't bother with it. When I was exonerated, I didn't let anybody get away. I sued every entity that had a hand in what happened to me. That included the prosecutor. I swam upstream, even though I knew there was a doctrine called Prosecutorial Immunity, which states that no matter how egregious the misconduct is, if a prosecutor does it after an arrest has been made, then they're deemed to have done so as an advocate, and therefore you could not sue them. That means they could withhold exculpatory evidence. They could threaten a witness. They could threaten to take a witness's child away. They could suborn perjury. They could not correct perjured testimony. They could work hand in glove with an expert. Tell me what you want to prove, and I'll prove it. It doesn't matter how egregious it is. It doesn't matter what the impact is. If it happens after an arrest, they have immunity. You can't sue them. So not wanting him to get away, notwithstanding that doctrine, I tried to swim upstream, and my lawyers came up with the novel theory. And although I beat everybody in court, that was the one aspect of the case that was lost. And the judge dismissed my lawsuit against that prosecutor because of that doctrine. And in his footnote, he said, I'm not dismissing this claim because I don't find it to be serious or because the plaintiff couldn't prove it, but instead it's because of this doctrine, and you should consider filing a complaint. So when I finished with the lawsuits, I circled back with my lawyers who did such a bang-up job for me, and I said, you know what? I want to take the judge up on his suggestion. I want to file a complaint. I want something. I want him held to justice for some kind of level, whatever is available. And my lawyer said to me, don't bother, Jeff. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. Nothing is going to happen. So when a legislative hearing was held a couple years ago in Albany over this bill, once again, S-2412C, where the prosecutors came out in full force and the advocates came out and the legislative hearing was held. And it came out that some of the prosecutors went to Senator DeFrancisco and they said, look, we really don't need this commission. We police our own. The current system is fine as is. Thank you. So the senator said, okay, well, if that's the case then, come back to me with a list of prosecutors who've had complaints lodged against them, and I want to know what the results are. And the prosecutor said, well, we'll be back in a couple weeks. Well, it's been a couple of years. Okay, the list is still not produced. Some of the counter arguments to the commission, well, the current system is fine. Listen, we have a system of training, and this is just young prosecutors, and we don't want a chilling effect. We want prosecutors to have a free hand in doing their job. We don't want them to be chilled in their job, and we want them prosecuting cases. We don't want them defending lawsuits. Well, I got a simple answer to that. If they don't want to be sued, don't run over constitutional rights. Don't wrongfully convict people. Don't engage in misconduct. Don't expose yourself. The forensic scientists don't have this immunity. The police don't have the immunity. You know what? They're not hindered from doing their job. There is no chilling effect. On the fiscal level, we looked at 12 cases only. New York is number 3 in the country in terms of frequency of wrongful conviction. And just in studying 12 cases, more than $100 million of taxpayer money has been spent in compensation cases. People deserve to be compensated when a wrongful conviction happens. Yeah, but isn't it better to never subject them to that injustice and save that money? Isn't that a much better way to go? Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's financial implications to that if the other arguments don't work for you. Now, I want to switch gears, and I want to talk about tools, because it's great to raise awareness and share information, but it's not an end in and of itself. It's a means to an end, and so action afterwards is really what determines if something is successful or not. So moving really quickly, I want to share various tactics that can be engaged in. So firstly, call your elected officials at critical time. Okay, we always get the bills passed on the Senate and the Assembly side. Every committee and subcommittee, we get it passed. We get all the way to the floor, and now all we need is the bill to be brought up for a general vote. And guess what happens at that point? That's when the prosecutors start picking up the phone and leaning on their elected officials, and that's when everybody starts getting scared. So that's the time when voters need to call up and push back and insist that the commission be passed. So in terms of calling, yeah, on an individual level, but collectively, there's phone banking, there's mass emailing, there's social media. That can really help. I want to highlight there's 2 elected officials in particular that we could really make a really good push on. That would be the Speaker of the Assembly, Speaker Heastie, and Senator Flanagan, the President of the Senate. Those two men have the power to bring the bill up for a vote. So if you feel strong enough about injustice, if you really want to make the connection between politics and injustice and race and injustice, because this happens mostly to minorities, although it does cross color lines, obviously, if you look at me, but it does cross, and it's mostly minorities. If you care about that issue, then we got to focus on, those two elected officials. Westchester is notorious. I know there's people here from Westchester. My case happened in Westchester. I was a resident of Peekskill. That's where I was wrongfully arrested at. I was wrongfully convicted in White Plains. The Westchester delegation, they're the biggest fraidy cats of them all. But and then we have Assemblywoman Galef, and we have Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who are against the bill. These two are against the bill. So if you care about the bill, and you vote and you are a constituent, I think that both of them need to hear from you. We've been collecting memos of support. So if you're with an organization or you know people that are with them, you can encourage them to write a memo of support. I have business cards which are left with Tanya, so you can email me. I'm happy to send Tasha. I'm happy to send you a link to the bill, other memos of support, other data, and so if you can help us get memos of support, that would be a concrete thing to do. Okay. We need to try to get some resolutions by common councils. We got one from Hudson. And we're trying to get more of the local municipalities to pass resolutions calling on the state legislature to get that passed. Lastly, if you're able to organize events in different districts, particularly Westchester, Assemblyman Heasty's district, Senator Flanagan's district, those things can really help. If you're able to write a blog or do podcasting or write articles, or you know people who are doing that, listen, we gotta raise awareness, and those are concrete things by which we can do. And thanks for listening to me. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the floor for Jeffrey? Discussion, comments?
You made a very compelling argument in support of this bill, and so I want to thank you for that. And I'm so sorry for what you went through. I just want to say, in terms of Cousins and Galef, you kind of point out why there's so much voter apathy. Because when you're thrown under the bus, it doesn't matter if it's a Republican or a Democrat that's throwing you under the bus. And if the Democratic Party wants to win elections, they need to really decide which side are they on.
Right.
Yeah. Are they on the side of the people or special interests in big business?
Right.
Yeah. But do you know why Stewart-Cousins and Galef?
Well, with respect to Stewart-Cousins, the reason is they're trying to, the so-called independent Democrats led by Senator Klein and company, they are against the bill, and she wants to try to keep them in the fold on other issues that are important to her, and so she kowtows to them. That's the reason with respect to Senator Cousins. I'm not sure what the rationale is as to Assemblyman Galef.
So your issue is being horse-traded, basically.
Yeah, again, we keep getting everything passed up until the end, and we can't get it up to the floor for a general vote.
Just, you said you were supported by Hudson Common Council, City of Hudson?
Yes, they passed the resolution, and yes. Yeah, Councilwoman Tiffany Garriga is our point person, and she got a resolution passed. That's the other thing. If you are interested in that initiative, you can email me. I'll connect you with Councilwoman Garriga. She'll send you what the resolution was. She can share with you what the process was. We have the model. It can be replicated. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We do need some help and some energy, though. There is some work involved.
Yeah.
No? Anyone? Okay.
So it didn't come up for a vote in the assembly either?
It didn't come up on either side, no. Everybody got sick this last end of a session, literally. They literally got sick, and they left in droves, and the Assemblyman Perry came back to us and said, look, I don't have the cushion anymore. I can't bring it up because a lot of members of my constituency, they've left. They're physically not here anymore, and that's how we lost this last time. But we're not going away. We're going to keep fighting, and we're going to keep building a coalition, and that's what my being able to speak here, today was about. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
Okay, thank thank you, Jeff, and like he said, I have his business cards. One of the reasons, and I got introduced to the concept of doing a panel not too long ago. So Jeff and I really just met. We known each other for like a week and a half. He was recommended to NIPAN through Sherilyn Pulver Goodman, who is part of our social justice committee at LovePan. So one of the things that, one of the ways to connect to communities of color is through coalition with organizations that are working for our shared interests. Prosecutorial misconduct affects people of color the most because arrests affect people of color the most and incarceration affect people of color the most. So it all ties in. So we have a newly formed criminal justice committee in NIPAN, which Juan and I are the only 2 committee members thus far. We're looking for more membership, but we will funnel down information from Jeff to NIPAN through that committee. So thank you guys for listening to that. I want to say a couple of things about my experience with engaging my own community of color as a progressive. During the campaign for Senator Sanders, I was captivated right away because he spoke about things that were relevant to me and my experience. When I shared my support for Senator Sanders with women in my community, I was laughed at, scoffs. You know, like, he's too old. He's never gonna win. And you know, I just stood my ground because I could not support either of the 2 other candidates, and I didn't. And with my community that I am personally engaged with, they are disengaged with the progressive movement because they don't see the relevance to their daily lives. They don't see it. So when I was speaking yesterday about the IDC, and I was saying, listen, we gotta know what Marisol's constituents are saying. We cannot go into communities and tell them how to act. IDC is important. We do need to get rid of the IDC. But if they don't see the relevance of getting rid of that representative, because that representative, as Gus said yesterday, brings home the bacon, and they have safer playgrounds, or more money in whatever program or school district that they have, who are we replacing? Are we replacing someone who's gonna carry that on? We have to, because that's their concern. So that's what I meant, and that's why I agreed with Kenny when he said, you know, election reform is a white issue. I don't think it's a white issue because it's just a white issue. I think it's a white issue because communities of color don't see it as relevant. They want to know what's in it for me. If that IDC person is bringing me something, you cannot take them away from me. That's just the bottom line, and I'm sorry, you know, that might come as a surprise to some people, but that's how it is. So engaging communities of color, you got to talk to people. You know, like the brother was talking about constitutional convention. I'm choosing no, and I have my reasons, but I need to hear from him why yes. I cannot come from a place, and this is what sometimes, you know, we do as progressives or liberals or whatever title, socialists, whatever you want to call us. We come from a place of being parents to people's experience, and we don't want to be parentified. We want to be heard, and we want to have conversations that are relevant to our experience. Case in point, in Westchester County, I would like to go up against our little prison industrial complex at the Westchester County Jail. It's in the form of a medical care provider. This medical care provider is coming out of Tennessee, very red community. They really don't care about people who are incarcerated. They cut costs at the expense of people's lives, literally. And a Westchester resident died. When I connected with his mom, she sobbed on the phone with me for 45 minutes. So just from one mother to another, I was like, I feel compelled to do something. She got to my emotions, she got to my heartstrings, and I'm like, let's do something. So this city councilman, Rochelle, who's also part of our social justice committee, Jarrett Rice, and his team conducted a petition. We have a petition to end this contract. Our Republican county executive brought them in, they had some deals, you know, he got a campaign donation, and he brought them in without even going to bid. That was the first time. Then they went to bid, didn't win the bid, But the way they got in is because they indemnify the county from lawsuits, right? The way they do that is because they cut services. They don't take care of people. And people who are incarcerated are American citizens, just like we are. And they have a right, we feel, to health care. So this petition is going around. We want 1,000 signatures, we have 208. We want more, we're working on getting more, but when I speak to people, I've spoken to black people of affluence, because you know Westchester, we have very affluent people, and then we have some people that are at the very bottom. So when I speak to my friends who are of affluence, they want to know, they're not engaged at the fact that somebody died, or he left six children behind, you know, because he was an inmate. He was a criminal. This is what goes back to me, from black people. So, like Carrie said, communities of color are not homogenous. There's all kinds of different kind of black people, all kinds of different kind of Latino people. So he wanted to know what's in it for me. So after we remove this contract, what are we replacing it with? Are you gonna get a new contract that guarantees some jobs to the black community? I said, you know what, why not? Why not? He said, now that makes sense to me. People want jobs. People want the opportunity to get to affluence. If they're in the middle, they want to get higher. If they're at the lower part, they want to get to the middle. So those are just my preliminary sharing with you how I experience my own community and what's going on with Westchester and how we as progressives can behave in terms of engaging people. So without further ado, I would like to introduce two panelists that I'm going to have to ask to introduce themselves, if you don't mind, and they're going to talk about how to engage communities of color.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
My name is Glenn Kantav, and I'm a member of Black Lives Matter Greater New York. And I just want to start off by paraphrasing Dr. King. Basically what he was saying is that the greatest threat to America is not the Klansman, but rather the white moderate. The white moderate is more interested in order rather than seeking justice. So we need to acknowledge that really quick. And it doesn't matter, in terms of the context of what he was saying here, we bring it back to contemporary times. This white moderate could be more liberal than Bernie Sanders, but content in the fact that, you know, I can share some Facebook posts, or as long as I'm good, everything's good. And I'm here to deliver a wake-up call, white people. It is time to get uncomfortable.
Yes.
I'm gonna say it one more time. It is time to get uncomfortable. For example, if you look at what went down in Charlottesville, the reason why the socio-political climate of this country changed after Charlottesville was because of the fact that white supremacy was displayed in a way that made white people feel uncomfortable. It's a matter of seeing the Nazi signs and the KKK flags, stuff that scares the shit out of me. Either way, the bottom line is that, you know, whether it's NYPD or whether it's the complex rules and institutions that keep our people down, we are uncomfortable each and every single day of our lives.
Amen.
Bottom line. So when I say it's time to get uncomfortable, my real question is, what are you going to do? You look at William Lloyd Garrison and the abolitionists and the Liberator movement and the Liberator newspaper that they had. This was white people literally putting their lives on the line for the sake of justice. If you look at, I was in Charlottesville myself, and I remember I saw a white woman out there talking about putting your body on the line. The woman had staples in her head after getting hit by the KKK in the morning and was out there again saying, let's put our bodies on the line. So my question is, what you gonna do? Really reflect, what you gonna do? Look, for every, what is his name? For every Jeffrey Deskovic out there, there is a handful of people like Khalid Browder. Are y'all familiar with Khalid Browder? Say his name. Say his name. The bottom line is that we are the subjects of a system that has terrorism inherent in its structure. That's the bottom line. It is about terror. So it's a matter of what are we going to do? We need people out there putting their bodies on the line. We need people out there to discredit the fact that you have movements in terms of the media out there that are looking to discredit the Black Lives Matter movement as a terrorist organization. So what are you going to do? We don't have the privilege. You have the privilege, is the bottom line. Look at the fact, if you look at the fact that you had the People's Climate March come out with 400,000 people, it was a largely white movement. Meanwhile, you look at protests in Baltimore, you look at protests in Ferguson, when we're out here saying what we have to say, we are terrorists, it's time for you to go out to your communities and shout it out loud from the hilltops that white supremacy is terrorism. Because when we say it, we get arrested. I have no problem getting arrested. I've been arrested. I'll continue to be arrested for protests until the day that I die. Let's go. But are you ready to do the same thing? Are you ready to make yourselves feel uncomfortable? Are you ready to put your bodies on the line? That's the question that we're really asking you. It's not about order, but it's rather about justice. So the real question I want to ask you about is, what are you going to do? I'm asking you to use your privilege to reach out to your communities and let people know what's going on, and the fact that, and to deconstruct the language. Look, the bottom line is the alt-right, they're smart in what they do. You have all lives matter. And then, people are like, oh yeah, all lives matter, it sounds good to me. Bottom line is, it's not so simple anymore. There is a White Lives Matter rally coming out on October 28th. So look, it's scary. I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna curse out some Nazis. I'm ready for it. The bottom line is, are you gonna be there?
Where?
And financial means is a whole different question. When there's a will, there is a way. So, organize, get money together. Hopefully we'll see you on the front lines and we can talk more later. Once again, my name is Glenn Kantav. I'm a member of Black Lives Matter Greater New York. In terms of uncomfortableness as well, really quick shameless plug. I have another group, Movers and Shakers. We're going to be hosting a slave auction at Columbus Circle at 4 p.m. November 5th. Come out. It's uncomfortable. Get uncomfortable. Yeah, I can share the information. Once again, November 5th, 4 p.m., Columbus Circle, slave auction.
You mentioned the White Lives Matter, and obviously there will be some opposition protests. How can we join that? Where do you know where and when it's going to be?
Yeah, it's in Tennessee. We can talk after in terms of specific logistics, but it can make something happen for sure.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, you could also go to blacklivesmattergreaternewyork.com to get further information.
Yeah, I just want to add some insight, because what you said was great. And I know Nepal, you about to kill me, so I know. But in addition to that, the fight for justice is also a power struggle. So the big thing about white people is they suck at sharing power. Right? They're terrible at it. And so, the opposite of white supremacy is black power, right? And so the uncomfortableness is the fact that all these black people are seeing the table, and white people are sitting at the table, and they're saying, we'll make some room, we'll add some extra chairs. But in order for us to sit at the table, some people got to get up. And so that uncomfortableness means that a lot of people in this room are going to have to give up their power. And that power stretches beyond just those alt-right people down in Charlottesville. That power is school segregation. That power is your workplace, right? That power is every single other institution. I just want to add on.
Hi.
And thank you very much for being so brave and helping us make him feel uncomfortable. But if we really want to feel uncomfortable, we want to take it a little bit deeper, much deeper, to tear down all the layers of racism. Racism goes back all the way to when they conditioned, for instance, people in my country, in the Dominican Republic, to believe that someone who's white is superior. So even in the Dominican Republic, and you're black, or if you're darker, then you're superior. So the layers of racism are much deeper. So we need to really get comfortable and tear it all down. All down that we're just human beings, and there's no superior race. And that's what it comes down to.
All right.
One second. Excuse me. We are on a time crunch. There are 4 black women in here. I am not gonna let this sister have the least bit of time. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So please hold your question.
All right. My name's Motoki Zulu. And I've heard a lot about 16 and 17-year-olds. I'm 17. I'm head of the Youth Coalition for Black Lives Matter Greater New York. So first, the gentleman over here, it really bothered me when he's talked about black people not voting. Well, when it comes to, like, as a young person, they took civics out of inner city schools in urban communities. We're not, I've been privileged to, try to teach myself and learn from others behind me, that's around me, but not everybody has that same opportunity and privilege.
Right.
Like, they're literally depriving us of our God-given right in a so-called democracy.
Hey.
So, this is not okay. So if you want to talk about that, talk about the underlying factor to why young people don't vote and supposedly black people don't vote. So that's why I just want to talk about that. And when it comes to, like, being uncomfortable, I'm a black person. I'm uncomfortable every single day, and I just want to address racism. So can any white person in this room quickly tell me what racism is? What's the definition of that? Like, what do you think?
Don't
What do
be
you think?
scared.
Don't be
We're all
scared.
family here. Don't be scared. Take a
Yeah,
chance.
go ahead.
Having preconceived notions of a person by their external appearance.
That's part of it, yes.
Institutional discrimination.
Yes.
Progress impossible.
Yes. Okay, so what he said was right.
I was gonna say.
Okay.
I grew up being told that when you're poor, when you're disenfranchised, you have a perspective that nobody else is able to impart privilege. So as a white man, even though I'm Jewish, in New York specifically, I'm a white man, I don't know what the hell racism is because I don't experience it, I don't know it. And I think that it's important for other white cishet, especially men, to understand that we will never understand racism.
Okay.
That deep context.
Exactly.
Stop.
One second. I will. Okay, so I heard institutional, which is definitely correct. To break it down simply, racism is power and privilege. It's not completely 100%, I don't like you because you're black, or I don't like you because you're white. The word racism is self-explanatory. The suffix ism means system, systematic. Hypothetically speaking, as a black woman, I can say, and hypothetically speaking, I don't hate white people, but just saying, if I said I don't hate white people, right now, that's not gonna change a damn thing but hurt some feelings, okay? That's not gonna, white people saying, and it's historically proven, that we don't like black people, we feel that we are better than black people, impacts us totally, systematically. And that's what people have to understand. Racism isn't just about that, and we've been purposely miseducated on racism, so we don't stand up and fight back against it, in a progressive way. You can, as a white person, you can call yourself a progressive, but if you're not going back to this is one thing you just really need to do. Go back to your communities and educate your people, educate yourselves. You cannot, rely on black people to tell you everything, because we didn't start this. So, I just want you guys to, understand, and if you have further questions for me, we'll talk about it afterwards. And this one, I don't like Thomas Jefferson, just to close, I don't like him, but there's one thing he did say in the Declaration of Independence, and I had to write it down so I can remember. If the government becomes destructive to life, and I just summarize it, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it is the right of the people to either alter or abolish it. We need to take our power back. Okay? By any means necessary, as Malcolm X said. And if you are really a progressive, you will help. You will help. You're not just going to sit there and label yourself as a progressive and sit down and watch black people get killed every single day. Because I'm accountable to black people. You are accountable to white people in changing the thought process. Thank you.
Questions from the floor, the gentleman in the back?
Sure. So I just want to tie this to what was brought up earlier, because I'm sure everyone on that first panel was really well-meaning, but a lot of that I think was just, all those policies are great. They're not going to fix a goddamn thing, because none of it addressed what was being brought up here before. we are lying to people if we are telling them that go out and vote and we're going to fix it. It's
Right
not
on.
going to happen. You can have 100 people voting. It's not going to get better until people take to the streets in popular movements. And civics classes are great. I'm a U.S. history teacher. I teach civics every day. When we draw these diagrams on the board, we're like, these are the 3 branches, and this is how we're lying to our children. You people need to take to the streets. In other countries, when things go wrong, 1 million people march on the Capitol. Here we go, register to vote, sign your name here, and then a year from now, you'll do nothing. I'm not saying don't vote, but if all you're doing is voting, you aren't doing anything. These are the movements that are going to change things.
Sal, did you want to say something earlier, Sal?
No, it was a definition of racism.
Okay, sorry. Arthur?
Yeah, I want to come back to what I said this morning before Hawk spoke. It is critical for our movement, which can be a movement that changes the face of New York, changes the face of the United States, for the basically white Bernie supporting movement to figure out and listen to the voices that we're hearing, how we're going to merge on every day when we decide what we're going to do, when we make a plan, when we decide what issues we're going to work on, when we decide how to approach those issues. We have to think about the problem of the fact that our movement was largely white, that the establishment Democratic movement, the Democratic Party movement, and the establishment in general often relies on people in the black community who they have representatives in, who they tell we're the ones who are going to take care of you. You know, there was something very, very accurate about what Donald Trump was saying. Hey, the Democrats have been telling the black community for years that they're going to take care of them, and they don't do anything. Well, we have to be very cognizant of that every time we do something, because if we don't succeed, you know, a year from now in having a conference that's half people of color, right? We're making advances. We have people like Tasha in leadership and Sal in leadership, but we have Jumani talking the way that Jumani talked. We have Ken saying what he's saying to people, making people uncomfortable. But we have to think about it all the time in making plans, in making decisions about what issues to take up, in making decisions about which demonstrations to go to, about which candidates to support in elections, about the question of merging the Bernie Sanders progressive movement with the movement against racial inequality and for racial justice.
So we have to cut.
Just very briefly. So Black Lives Matter Greater New York has a handout on how to coalesce, how white groups can coalesce with groups of color. The handout will be in the email that will be sent out. Just look out for that, because there are some critical elements, and if you don't educate yourself on it, you're going to get checked on it and you're going to get kicked out straight up.
Thank you. And in the spirit of creating coalition, Black Westchester Magazine came to one of our criminal justice reform panels. They have availed a spot for me to write in this newspaper, which comes out monthly and weekly online. So this is how you build coalition. If you see a Black-owned business, which this is, support it. And then speak in it and write in it. So now progressives have a voice in this newspaper. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tasha. Thank you to all of our panelists. Do you have?
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. I'm Paul Newsom, president of Black Lives Matter Greater New York. Whether it's independents, socialists, progressives, black people have had masters for too long. If you want to come and do business with us, treat us as equals. We are not your tokens. We are not props. We are nothing of the sort. We are here fighting for equity, for equality. If you want to fight with us, fight along beside us, but don't think for 1 second we're a dog and pony show. If you're coming to us, come correct. And we'll fight for you just like you fight for us.